Who's got a hangover from the Melbourne Cup yesterday? Somebody. Did anybody win some money yesterday? Drinks on you? Yeah, drinks on us and bars over there. So thanks everybody for coming. So this is meetup number 56. We've been going for 5 years and a bit now. So a couple of things tonight. So sponsors, so Polar 7, so we organise this, been running it for a few years now. Daryl is the face that you guys normally would have seen up here. Tonight he's sitting at home babysitting. He's very sad. Move for him. Just a couple of things before we get on to the speakers for tonight. AWS reInvent, does everybody know that that's happening in the month? Anybody going? You'd like more information? If you care to go to their website and register, then you will find all the information there. But yeah, sorry, show of hands, who is actually going? Anyone? 2 people? Excellent. So next month we'll be doing our user group. We'll actually be talking about what was announced at reInvent. So if you're not going along or if you missed the stuff there, it'll be a good topic to come along to. Have a little panel. We've got some people that are going along and they can come back and talk. Announcing some stuff that was happening there. So we'll recommend that you go along there anyway. Something we got asked by AWS. So AWS are doing a hiring spree for developers for the Seattle WA office. So if anybody is interested in going to Seattle for a job, by all means, or if you're looking for any other roles anyway, have a chat to Kev. Where is Kev? Raise your hand, Kev. Kev over there. If you're looking for any other roles as well, have a chat to him in the break and have a conversation. Okay, so just on to tonight. So we've got 2 speakers tonight. So we've got George from AWS about the people part of the cloud project. Then the break, so we'll have our usual networking, beers and pizzas, and then Alan's 2. So we'll start tonight with George. George is going to be talking about the biggest blocker, people. So anybody had that in their organisation where they're trying to get stuff done? Well, that happens. Yeah. So George is going to go through some of that, the studies that show how to fail it. So that would be very good. So George, if we can come on, we'll just switch over to slides.
Awesome, thanks Gary, and thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to come talk to you tonight. This is a subject I'm really passionate about, so I'm hoping to give insights on the projects I've worked on, where things haven't gone so well, and what the key reasons been and how we can address that. First off, a little bit about me. So I'm part of AWS Professional Services. We're actually part of the sales organisation of AWS, and what we are really there to do is make our customers successful and use our platform. So we talked a little bit about roles. AWS Professional Services is definitely hiring. So if you'd like to talk to me, if you're interested in learning about how you can consult with AWS, I'll be happy to talk to you. Just interestingly, within AWS ProServe itself, there are some roles that are very technical and hands-on, and those guys are out there cutting CloudFormation, Lambda, that kind of stuff. But we also have a lot of roles which deal with more around delivery of cloud projects. So that's what I'm talking to you a little bit about tonight: project management, people management, those kind of areas. And I wanted to present to you today because I see a lot of customers struggle. I see a lot of customers with very grand visions about what they're going to achieve with the cloud, not really getting there. Give you an example, 2013 Avon in the US, 125 million SAP migration. Huge project, ended up failing. The whole thing had to be rolled back because they hadn't consulted their salespeople well enough. And in fact, lots of salespeople started trying to quit because they just hated the application being rolled out. In the end, the whole thing had to be rolled back. The whole thing was a failure. Nothing wrong with the technology, nothing wrong with the application, nothing wrong with the project management, but. So 3 takeaways I want you to have from this session is where you can go and get some information, why it's important, and what you can do to touch the project. What are the sort of key things in terms of successful people side of your project. Okay, so one thing that's really important, I just want to establish before we start off, what's the business value of actually migrating to the cloud? Why are you going to the cloud? Forget technology sector. What is it about moving to the cloud that just makes it valuable to the business? And there's actually sort of a few dimensions here to sort of think about. You're actually talking about utility of information. You're saying that the information your company has that it uses to make products or services for people or improve the way it does things, that is what is valuable. And by moving it to the cloud, you make it more valuable in some way. This is a really important point. And there's 3 dimensions you make it more valuable. You change the cost of actually using that information. So we all know you save cost when you move to the cloud, right? Well, not always. Not always. If you move to the cloud, you don't configure the architecture properly, you can easily spend much more than you would have done. But there is a cost. If you can get moving to the cloud right, you can decrease the cost of using that information, processing that information in the cloud. The capability you can apply to that information. So if I've just moved that information to the cloud, hold it a bit closer. If I can apply more capability to that information when it's in the cloud, it becomes more useful, it becomes more valuable too. Okay? So a great example is autoscale. If I can autoscale when I suddenly have a lot more demand than I normally do, that information becomes much more valuable. Equally, security. If you can apply more security to information for less cost when it goes to the cloud, the information becomes more valuable. And then management. The way I manage, the way I look at that information becomes more valuable. So let's say when I move to the cloud, I introduce zero-touch computing, right? So I don't touch anything once it's in place, but I really train all my devs so that they don't patch it. Just release a new version of the code every month on pre-baked things that already got patches. That can save days of time every week. So therefore, I've made my management more effective. If I can make releases in minutes rather than days, I become more effective. So all of these things are changing the value. Now, what's the one common thing across all of those things that's actually going to make it happen? It's the people who do the work, right? It's the developers, it's the people who operate the system, it's the people who use the application that makes that thing happen. So when you're going through cloud and you're thinking about, okay, how do I use AWS? I'm thinking about the real technical stuff. I'm thinking about my VPCs and my S3 bucket policies and all that stuff that's all really important. Just remember at the end of the day, it's the people who use what you're moving that's actually going to deliver the value back to the business. Okay, so a couple more things on the needs of. Number one question, are you really clear on who the users of your cloud project will be and their needs? I can't tell you the amount of customers that I go to, and I sit down with their cloud team, and I sit down with the guys who are trying to move to cloud, and I say, okay, so who's actually going to use this once this application or the capability is built once? And they say, oh, well, it's the apps guys. Okay, but if you talk to the apps guys, are they in the room? Even when I talk to application guys, I might say to the application guys, right, oh, we're going to move our apps to AWS, it's going to be fantastic. I say, well, yeah, who's going to sign off? Who's going to look after this application when it's running? Who's going to pick the phone up at 3 in the morning when the server? Is it someone else? You talk to that someone else? Do they know they're going to do it? Have they understood what they're going to do? So you've got to be really clear about the needs of your. And remember that your needs of your users at the moment aren't necessarily the same needs that they're going to have when you move to the cloud. Their needs can change. People's needs change over time, right? Your users aren't some amorphous group who are never going to change their needs. Your needs of what you want from your TV, for example, are different now than you were maybe 10 years ago. There's more features and functions that you want. So this is why we have Shadow IT, because people can just go to the AWS website and see exactly what they can do. And then they say, right, fantastic, but if you don't give me that, if you don't give me that ease of functionality, I'm just going to go and do it myself. It's a nightmare. So it's really helpful to think of your platform, your cloud environment as a retail product. So let's say you're going to go and set up a new shop selling cakes. You're going to want to know exactly what cakes people want to buy, how they want to buy them, how they want to pay for them, when they want to pay for them, what age they are, what taste they are, how quickly they're going to want the new brand of cakes that have just come out. You have to start understanding. Because if you don't, it's really, really easy to build a white elephant and no one wants it. So it's very important that when you're thinking about your code, you're not just thinking about the bits and bytes, you're thinking about the people who are actually going to use it. Also remember that cloud is not something that was just built in a day. The days of us running 18-month IT projects that last for 5 years with a specific return on investment are gone. Okay, the functionality your users need in 3 months is probably about as far out as you can predict. Anything further than that, you're probably going to get it wrong. If you try and work out what people want in a year from their cloud platform or from the way you build and operate AWS, you're probably going to. So you've got to have a mechanism for talking to your users constantly, finding out what they do and don't like about you. And then finally, you've got to deliver like a real product. You're not going to spend, as I said, 18 months designing some big highfalutin thing and then deliver that and it's going to work. Okay? You've got to be pushing out functionality the whole time. With S3, our storage object service, if you look at what that is now compared to what it was when it was released all those years ago, it's a very, very different service. It's still basically a huge amount more functionality. So those are released month after month. You're going to be doing the same thing. Most IT organizations are not set up to function that way. Most IT organizations have a funded project, which is some functionality, hands over to business as usual, and the business as usual guys are expected to sit there and just, they're not expected to constantly improve the platform. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of enterprises and the customers I tend to deal with to get their minds around. So, a little bit about the needs of the users. Let's talk about why cloud projects fail. The main reason cloud projects fail is because people don't want to use them. Okay? Simple. People do not want to use them. It is not a technology problem. It's not that we don't know how to design things. It's people don't want to use them. Now I'm going to come on to a little bit why people don't want to use them. But if you aren't thinking about how you're going to fix that as part of your cloud project, the statistical chances of you failing are very high. Now AWS, we use a company, we don't really partner, but we use a lot of their methodology called ProSci, P-R-O-S-C-I. They're an American company. They're kind of like PMP, if you use project management, that kind of organization. But they are very good at publishing a lot of statistical data about projects and the impact of projects on people and the difficulties they have. So you can go into a lot of detail with this stuff. And I'll talk about some of those examples later, but there's some really good information for you about why projects tend to fail. Now notice the second part of that sentence, the ineffective management of the people side of it. So it's not just a question of telling people what's happening or why they need to do it or what they need to do. It is the day-to-day direction they get people around them that really matters. If you don't get that right, your cloud projects are likely to have a problem. Now, very rarely do I go and see a customer and they've really got this right, or even thought about it. Most people doing development, most people building clouds do not go and speak to their engineers. And more importantly, they don't go and speak to the managers of who they expect to use their platform. Okay. AWS uses a model called stages of adoption. I won't get into it too much detail, but basically we have sort of 4 phases that customers will typically go through on their cloud journey. And one thing we've really noticed, and there's a really good talk by a guy called Eric Tachibana. He's our regional ProSci manager. He did a really good talk at re:Invent last year, something called the Great Stall. Now, the Great Stall is a phenomenon that we've seen across a lot of customers, where there's a lot of early enthusiasm for cloud. There's a lot of, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to go all in, we're going to move hundreds of apps. They move a few. There's a lot of early interest in DevOps, a lot of sort of cheerleading, and then it either tails off or even just goes backwards. When the reality of the situation of actually trying to change how people work kicks in. So if you're not really clued up right at the start about how you're going to get everyone in your organization, or all of the users to actually make the change that you're asking them to, you're going to have a problem. So, what are some of the key components you need to think about? So there's kind of 3, there's a model which we like to use, which is this one, which is there's 3 key things you need to be good at when you're making a change. So if you want your project to be on time and on budget and actually get the ROI that you want back, whether it's a cloud project or any other kind of it's the same thing. But essentially there's 3 things you need to be. So the first is obviously leadership and sponsorship. Now if I want to make a bunch of developers change the operating system they use or code in a different way, or if I want to make a bunch of operations people suddenly use a whole set of new tools, the only way they're going to do that is if they believe it's for every user, you should always be asking the question, do you understand what is there, what's in it? People don't generally tend to do things they're made to do it. So you're going to ask them to use your new application or do things in a different way or develop in a different way. You have to be able to ask the answer to what's in it. Now the what's in it for me really comes from sort of two key sources. One is the whoever they respect within their organization. So they need to feel that what you're asking them to do has some big impact in the way their organization. So you need the execs, you need the CIO to stand up and say, yeah, we're going to do cloud, it's really important. If you want a career at this company, you're going to do cloud as well. You need that kind of statement. I was really lucky to work with a guy at Qantas called Chris Taylor, and he keynoted at the Sydney Summit about two years ago, and he gave a really compelling reason why cloud was important. Interestingly, it wasn't actually that much to do with technology, it was to do with culture. It was to do with the fact that Qantas wanted to become a much more innovative company. So making people go to cloud, saying cloud is important to us, kind of broke a lot of the silos, sort of dinosaur IT that they had in there, and really helped us with the cloud platform. Then there's project management, and obviously project management, everyone knows project management, right? We're all big agile fans here. But project management itself is really important for cloud projects. It's actually really anathema. The way we deal clouds, what I was saying earlier about you releasing in tranches and releases, you not being certain about what you actually deliver, the fact you may change based on user feedback, that is not how most project managers work in organizations, where they have defined budgets, defined deliverables, defined schedules. So whilst people might say they're doing agile, whether they really believe it, whether their organization is willing to do it that way, another question. But the key one there is change management. Am I managing the way that people work? So for example, one of the things I'll do when I'm doing an engagement is I'll sit down and I'll catalogue all the people that are impacted by the cloud change. And that can be really big. So in Qantas, where we've created an environment to support many applications, many services, there were tens and dozens of different groups impacted by that change. They all felt very differently. Some of them were very supportive, some of them weren't. So for example, their application outsourcing saw it as a means of improving the way they did application management. Well, some of them did. The people who were the support teams saw it that way. The account managers for that outsourcer actually saw their revenue from operators moving to cloud, where they'd use a very headcount heavy way of supporting before. We brought in a lot of automation that changed their commercial model for how we would use cloud. So whilst everyone was saying, yeah, we want to go onto cloud, really a lot of the account managers didn't really want to. So you've got to understand that. You've really got to understand at quite granular level who is impacted and how they may feel about this change. What am I doing for time, Gary? Okay, so I'm just going to tell you one of the models that we use. This is called ADKAR. So this is really helpful in terms of assessing whether someone's actually likely to be able to make the change that I want to make. Stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability. And very much like the 7 stages of grief, it is something you have to go through to change. And what's really interesting about this is if I asked you to make a change, what are the things that are going to make you more or less likely? Well, you may say, you probably think, well, it's probably how good it is, or how easy I find that to do, right? How well trained I am, or how important, or how I personally feel about it. In fact, the research shows that's not the case. It's something quite as simple as awareness of showing me that this is actually an important thing that I need to do, and what is it the change you're asking me? We're actually very poor explaining why we want to use it. Or we do it in the way that means something to developers, but it doesn't mean anything to like ops guys or finance guys, security guys. So you have to make people aware of what the change is that you're trying to make. And how do you get awareness, right? That's partially through people you respect, like the CIO or CTO or something like that. Also partially through your line. Because how you feel about making a change is probably wrapped up in how you feel about doing your job generally. Like, are you happy in your job? Are you looking to make a move? Do you hate coming into work every day? That's going to make you more resistant to making it. It's interesting how that can flow through into the success of Are you desiring to support the change? Do you actually want to do it? Do you see it as a career-enhancing thing to go and use cloud? Do you just see it as another fad, like all the other changes the organisation has rolled through that nothing else? So it's really, we kind of look at this stuff with a lot of our consultants, see how effective the cloud is. And then knowledge, Knowledge is an interesting one. Do you think that for most enterprise users of AWS, it benefits them to go on an AWS training? It may do, if they're going to use AWS directly, if they're going to use our platform in the way that we train people on our AWS training courses. But what if they're not? What if they're going to go through a third party? Or what if they're going to go through a cloud management plan? What if their experience of using AWS is nothing like how the training course is? So the training's got to be really appropriate. You've got to think about, how do I actually train people actually to do their job? Make sure that's it. And then ability. So not only have I trained them, but I've actually demonstrated that they can do it. I've actually got feedback from the users actually that I know that they're able to do on cloud platform. So one of the big problems is a lot of cloud projects focus on DevOps and CI/CD. Right? We love every company to be able to work that way. But maybe 5% of an enterprise's applications are actually capable of working that way. All the rest of those applications have never been designed to work that way. The capabilities they consume have never. The users are used to pointing and clicking and running setup.exe once a quarter. That's how they do their work. You can't tell them they're wrong. If you just try and make everyone use DevOps, it's going to fail. Everyone say this is too hard, I don't want to do it. So that ability, that's why I'm all about incremental change. Look at our cloud project. And then reinforcement. If I get everyone to make a change, but it's really easy to go back to the old way of doing it, they're going to go back. We all like comfort. We all like the old way of doing things. Anyone who's tried to diet knows how easy it is to step back into old ways of doing it. So this is typically what I would advise you to look at, is really have a good understanding. And what I will do when I do consulting is I sit down and I profile all the groups affected and I work out where they are on this journey. And so I can target them. There's no point in me just saying I'm going to go and train everyone to use AWS if I haven't figured out that they actually know what the change is. Okay, so what's the number one thing you need to get right? Sponsorship. So this is quite a nice little graph here that says if you had little or no access or an inadequate access, this is a big survey done. This is how likely your project is. And by access to sponsor, a visible sponsor is going to turn up, he's going to come to stand-ups, he's going to come to review meetings, he's actually going to make them feel important. The interesting thing I think for us as well around sponsorship has been, it really isn't just the CIO standing up. It needs the line manager, the people you're asking to change, making those people very aware that the change is important. So if you want your devs to stop using .NET and use something else, they've really got to have their line manager. And interestingly, the motivations of line managers is very different from the motivations of the people they manage. They are not normally technical people. They have a completely different set of importance in what they do. If they don't perceive the change to be important, they're not going to get the people who work for them to perceive it to be important as well. So they're not going to follow through. So on our projects, we spend a lot of time looking at this particular aspect as well. Are the line managers, are the people of authority in the company, do I understand what the authority is in the company to make a change? But the most important one is the user's line manager. So I've quite a few things there. Okay.
Yeah, so carry on.
All right. So I'm just going to give you a few things where to go next. So ProSign itself as well. Also the cloud adoption framework. So hands up, who knows what the cloud adoption framework is? Okay. All right. So let me give a little sales pitch to the cloud adoption framework. So the cloud adoption framework is something that's published by AWS ProSign. It consists of a number of perspectives. So these are things you need to think about when you're designing your clouds. And they cover, actually mainly not technical, but things like financial management, security management, business management, project management, people management. A lot of the soft skill areas that make cloud successful, make it usable if you don't do them. So if you take one action today, when you get home, is Google AWS Cloud Framework and look up all the different perspectives. So we publish white papers that give you a lot of information about what you should and shouldn't do in regards to these perspectives. So this one here, this covers the skills and the approach to look after your cloud environment properly. There's probably two dimensions to it. The first is skills, right? What skills do you need to have in your organization properly? What kind of organization? What should the relationship between that organization and other organizations? How do you deal with demand? Training, communications about what you can and can't. There's nothing worse than saying to the organization, our cloud's amazing, we can spin servers up in half an hour, but when it actually comes down to it, no, do a whole bunch. So there's a lot of sort of stakeholders. One of the things that we talk about with customers, talk about early proof of concept. How do I demonstrate the value of the cloud to my business? One of the worst things you can do is pick an application up, strip out all of the governance controls, and fire it up in Amazon and say, look, it only takes half an hour. It used to take 6 weeks to get a server, and now I can spin it up in half an hour. Ignoring the fact that the reason it takes 6 weeks is not a technical problem. Most VM environments are just as fast as AWS. There is a process problem, and it's to do with about 5 or 6 different silos in your organization, having to sign things, take paperwork. They've each got 48-hour turnarounds on. You've got to have a meeting about it. You have a change of report. Those things are why it takes 6 weeks or 6 months. I mean, there's an absolute horror story. So you can't just take that and then fire it up in Amazon and say, well, now it takes, because you haven't put in all of that governance. That governance wasn't there for fun. people put it in because they want their environment cross-controlled, stable, secure. You can do all of those things with automation. You can make it that fast. But it's not as easy as just saying. So the skills and the approach around to do that, that's all. The people perspective also covers the topic I'll talk to you about tonight. There's a number of other perspectives it is worth having a look at. Most of the time people say to me, what should I do around service management, ITIL, CMDB, security management, all those really important areas to make something in your environment. That's all covered in these different perspectives. If you do make it to reInvent this year, I will be at reInvent, and do come find me, and I'd love to take you in and have a beer and talk. ProSci themselves are really, really good. It's a really, really good resource if you want to understand how to make and how make people change the way they do the work. And every cloud project involves changing the way. I think that might have been a hint. I think that's it. Thank you very much. Happy to share.
Thanks very much, George. I just want to make sure we have enough time for questions. We don't get AWS guys here that often, so let's ask George lots of questions.
You can ask me technical questions. I might have to make it up, but I'll do my best.
So what's going to be announced? It's ahead of the curve.
I really can't. Mainly because I don't know, actually. One thing AWS is very, very good at is the need to know principle. Now, you've seen that in the way we work, but that's actually true inside. I will honestly tell you, I do not know where our data centers are in Sydney. I don't. And I've been at Amazon 3 years. It is a very, very very closely guarded secret. But need to know, and what's being released at reInvent is just silly. We are given kind of quarterly roadmaps of bits of functionality, but things like Aurora and things like that when they're.
So anyway, thank you very much for talking. It was very interesting. It's good because we have a lot of technical tools here. I think it's really interesting to talk about the people aspect because we always think about the technical thing, like can we make it bigger, better, faster, cheaper, and we forget about like people fear change, right? So you have to get that through the process of the organisation. So do we have any questions for George at the moment?
Why doesn't this question?
So let me ask the question. So you decided to do a migration, the management said yeah?
Where's the you guys did that?
So it's really interesting to think about what's happening when you migrate something. Let's say I literally pick up a server that's in my existing data center and move it. The actual technical bit of that is pretty simple. But somebody has to look after those servers. Someone has to log in, they have to patch it, they have to maintain it, secure it. It exists in an asset register somewhere. If it goes down, there's probably some sort of priority attached to it. There's a whole bunch of processing to sit around. It's not just the box. If I then move that onto AWS, all sorts of stuff can happen. For example, the licensing model. It existed over here, and now it exists over there. And do I need to buy 2 licenses? How do I flip that? Maybe I paid for that server before over there, standard purchase orders for every month, but now it's changing. I'm going to pay Amazon a percentage every month, a specific price. So there's all this change involved, even with the most simple. And it is extremely easy for someone in finance to say, for example, right, the cost of AWS is out of control. We've got no way of resolving our AWS bill to our purchaser. So you are not moving. And I work with a lot of big enterprise customers where they'll do things like they'll have an arrangement with IBM or HP, where they sign an annual purchase order for many millions of dollars. And everything that happens comes under that purchase order. And that's a mechanism, right? That's a mechanism that exists in that company to make that happen. But it's predictable as well, because at the start of the year, they said, this is what falls into that purchase order. Now you've got variable utility costs that doesn't fit nicely into that little. So your finance admins have a bill coming and say, I don't know what the PO is. There's no PO. Where's my purchase order with Amazon? It exists because someone's. So that seems like it's not a technical problem at all. It's a financial problem, but that can and does kill projects.
Many larger silos in your operating system database. And then they move into the cloud. Full innovation. One silo. And everything. Rather than have you got any
It's a great question. It's a great question, and not least because some people feel really defensive when you suddenly change the nature of what they do. So, do we have any? Do you have any MCSEs in it? One. Sorry. No, but let's say you spend your whole career doing your MCSE, you become really good at administering Microsoft servers, and then suddenly we say, right, well, now we're going to run servers differently. Now the DevOps team will be patching them. They're going to be doing the domain joins. They're going to work out what group. That is a lot of resistance. I will suddenly say, these guys don't know what they're doing. I know what I'm doing because I'm certified to do it. I've been trained to do it for years and years and years. And suddenly you're going to give it to those guys? So when we do our cloud projects, I've got to be reaching out to all of those teams and understanding those concerns and making them part of the solution. And so when we actually look at sort of team organization around it, we look at blended teams. People are coming out of different organizations to come together. The worst thing I can do is say your skill set is not validated, not needed. And you've got to manage that really, really carefully. Or they will say, these guys don't know how to manage this. I do. And I haven't been involved, so I've got no confidence they're able to. Or that if things fall over in the morning, I know what to do. That whole 3 in the morning phone call is a great example. Let's say you say a server falls at 3 in the morning, your CloudWatch alarm tricks off an event inside my service, and the ticket comes through the help desk. They've got to know what to do with that. If you haven't traced that CMDB and able to resolve it through to a business service, you know exactly what it was used for, you know exactly why it was created, when it was created. You don't know how to treat that incident. You don't know whether to kick off a Sev 1 because suddenly a new system's appeared in prod that didn't go through change control, or you don't know that it was actually an expected part of Autoscape, and a new server appeared because that's how AWS treats that. That's the kind of thing, and it's complex.
What about those big monolithic applications?
Yeah, so this is a good question. And when I was working at Qantas, Qantas.com consists of about, and this is all public, you can look up a presentation by a lady called Jessica Lynn at the Sydney Summit where she talked about how they broke up Qantas.com. It was about 20 different applications that constitute Qantas. And one of the big challenges they had before they moved it was you can't move it to cloud. It's too complex, too hard, too much testing to break it up. But in reality, that's the only way you can. If you just move a big box to AWS, it's still just a big box that's wielded really hard to make. You have to segment those applications.
I mean, these big applications, the companies have spent millions and millions of dollars. Now they need to spend another few million.
Yeah,
what's the return on investment?
Part of that's relative, because the licensing costs of those big applications normally outweigh the actual running costs or the cost of. So you see that a lot with SAP.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm referring to.
But typically the cost and the difficulty is not down to the technology, it is down to how they're run and how they're architected. So the answer to the question is, yeah, I need to sit down to be able to show the ROI. So going back to that original slide I had around the cost of infrastructure, the cost of capability. When I do TCO, total cost of ownership analysis, I look at all of those dimensions. And that's typically, if you're moving a big application like that, that's where you can get a lot of savings. So take a big SAP. Whenever they want to make a release to any part, that takes months and months and months of wasted time. The reason it does is because once you change one thing, you've got to test those changes on absolutely everything. If we can show them, look, if we can microservice, make it into different tiers, I can change one of those tiers without having to. So my amount of testing, management, service management, that's maybe 500. I can give them a monetary cost. You've got to be able to give the business guys a monetary. If it's just a like for like, I'm going to run this on AWS, I'm just going to compare the hardware cost, it's never as good.
Does the CIO ever ask you for an exit strategy? Supposing this whole migration fails, pull out.
Yeah, that's right. So that happens all the time. Also, once they've moved. Okay, say AWS fails, say you just decide to stop being a business. So they're both those questions. On the migration side, we tend to use, it's not just one way it happens. So if I look at an application, say 500 apps, they're not all going to move the same way. There's probably about 6 or 7 different methods. So we either mirror or we do block or a whole bunch of and so each one of those you need to be able to roll back. And then you've got to consider the implications of doing that. what happens if I run half, if I sort of roll half my environment? How am I going to manage that? That's one of the other dangers. It's very tempting to set up a unique management environment for AWS, for AWS specific things, but then don't manage other. Equally, you don't want to put a glass ceiling on all of your environments, so they all manage exactly the same way, and they all suck because you're using lowest complex. It is complex, but you must be able to answer that. Because, and that's exactly right. If I go to the BCP guys and say I'm doing a cloud migration next week, they say, well, what's your rollback date? Well, I don't. So that's straight away. That's straight away. It's not.
In terms of security, when you have migrated the site, yeah.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the way I tend to see it is, if you move to, I like to think our cloud environment, and we take security as very, very serious, number one priority. I like to feel that if you use our cloud priority, you have so much control over everything. You can encrypt absolutely everything. You can put whatever access control you like. You can retain keys for that encryption. You actually get far more capability than you would probably have on it. So my feeling is you've got to look at it, the balance. Okay. Yes, I'm putting my environment on not my hardware, but I have far more control over that than I would actually on physical hardware, and I have far more supply security that I'm monitoring, logging, encryption, and change management. I can set AWS up so that if anything at all changes, absolutely everything. That's not a capability. And the reason I don't have that is the cost of storage. I don't log everything because it would cost me a fortune. But on the cloud, I have access to so many different types to make that. But you can still, AWS is a very secure environment. You configure it to be secure. You can still configure AWS in a poor way.
Have you analyzed how many AWS implementations are actually rubbish in the grand scheme? It's like a token machine. You've got all these people subscribing, but actually the vast majority are losers.
Well, I'd say a couple of things. One, it changes over time. So what we thought was good 2 years ago is not necessarily good now. We did have, I'll be frank with you, we had a large-scale event that showed that some of the different resiliency, some work better in that event than others. Some people who are doing cold standbys and things like that found that it was actually better. So I think our understanding as AWS and what is changing a little bit, and so there's a couple of frameworks you can use. And again, if you haven't seen these, it's worth looking up. One is well architected. You can go on our website and look at what well architected, and the other is well operated. Those two things consist of a bunch of questions across a number of dimensions that, when you answer them, will kind of give you a feeling of how mature, how sophisticated, or how rubbish your architecture is. When we go in and we try and answer that question, that's the yardstick.
Something like the cloud templates that look very simple. They literally are. If you want to do anything, you down template, and there's not even a list. What property? That's why I'm saying it would be very hard to believe that most people, even remotely, to best or delivering the to that.
Yeah, so that's why I quite like the well frameworks, architect and operators. They very much deal with outcomes. So how are you managing? How are you making sure that the identity management is correct, so that I can't go and do things I shouldn't be? If we walk into a customer and everything's wide open, which is typical because devs allow everything to be wide open, then that's a real problem. One thing I will say is that the way you use Amazon is tied into the way application development. So, for example, I want to use CloudFormation. What CloudFormation? Am I allowed to just cook up something myself? Do I have to use a pre-canned template that's someone's already sent us? Yes, this gives. And for enterprises, if you're not doing the latter, because you'll end up with a Wild West. But equally, if I constrain my CS by saying, right, here's some templates, and by the way, if you want to change, you've got to go and raise a change it's going to take 2. That's what.
One more question. I don't know if you're aware of VMware environments, but there's a free tool called RV Tools, which is like a little auditing tool. Environment. Do we have something similar? If you go into a large enterprise, how do you discover everything that's there and have it in some sort of report? To go and resilient things.
There's a few services like AWS will do that ongoing, and there's also things like AWS Service Catalog, which what people. And we also publish the config API, so there's all sorts of third parties. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of work with ServiceNow, and one of the ways ServiceNow is a service management SaaS that we often use with customers. One of the things we often set up to do is a whole bunch of compliance rules. So it's constantly polling the ServiceNow environment. Things like, our security group set up. Is everything got a security group on it? Is that security group an approved security group? Is everything tagged? Are they using approved tag? Is the naming convention? You know, you set all that stuff up. And so there's a certain amount. So I look for that kind of what's the customer doing to
Okay, I know that George has to go because he's webinar has to run. If there's any more questions, we maybe have time for
one more
question.
maybe
If there's
a good
anyone, one good one. Everybody satisfied? Everybody wants a piece.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you.